Begin the current Daf, Masechet Shabbos Daf Kuv Mem Vav. Begin 12 lines down at the top of the Yommi. We continue with the halacha of the next Mishnah. We continue on the theme of this paragraph, which is discussing laws of preparing food on Shabbos as they apply to different areas. Ashir's corresponds with Kalzik and Cheskel to any time Daf Chaim, and we appreciate everyone who's joining us today. Some ideas we're going to speak about in today's Daf are opening a barrel of figs with a knife. Actually, in halacha, it's interesting. This is really where the sugya of opening up packages on Shabbos really is one of the main dafim that comes up. We're going to talk in the Talmudic literature, but that's opening up a barrel of figs with a knife. Which kinds of openings may and may not be made in the stopper of a barrel? When holes may be made enlarged or remade on Shabbos? Making a spout out of a cut reed. Also, soft felt material, when that may be worn on Shabbos, is that considered a beged, or is that considered as a masa, a carrying? Some important terms and concepts we can discuss are makabeh patish, which we've discussed many times, which is the finishing off a vessel, finishing it, called tikkun mana. The mipneshu memarich, the problem about taking something, smoothing out, let's say like a thick substance, and smoothing it out, is a problem about memachik, which is one of the amalachas of smoothing out the hide of the animal. Pesach asur lahaknis loitie, the biblical violation of making a Pesach would only, which is a problem about buying, it would only be if it's that hole is meant to take in and to take out. Rabbinically, it's even if it's one way, but biblically it's only a problem if it's meant to take inside and also to let out. And finally, the last concept is kamokim she'asu chachamim and maras ha'ayin afilu b'chet shechadarim asu. Rav tells us that when there's a problem about maras ha'ayin, that it has an appearance of wrongdoing, it's even if no one's watching. If it has the appearance, even in the private, most inner chambers, we would also say that that's going to remain forbidden. So we begin the current daf with the new Mishnah. The Mishnah says as follows: a person could break a barrel full with dried figs with a knife or with a sword. If he wants to eat the dried figs. Now, the reason why you're allowed to do this is because since it's mekalkal, and this again, you could think in your own mind, we're not going to say the actual halacha l'maisa, but let's say with the opening of a bag of chips or whatever, you're destroying the thing, so there's no isra of Shabbos. If you want to get to the contents inside, you could break the barrel to eat the figs. As long as you're not intending to make a vessel, meaning as long as you're not making a hole that's a good opening, that now you could use it through the hole, as long as that's not your intention, you're just destroying the barrel, you're allowed to do that to get to the contents. Additionally, continues the Mishnah, however, you're not allowed to make a hole in the cover, which is attached to the opening of the barrel, shel chavis of the barrel, to make a hole. Rather, what you could do is you could take off the whole cover. But if you're going to make a hole in it, so that's like we're saying, that's makabeh patish, you're making an opening, that would be a problem to make a Pesach for the vessel, and therefore that would be forbidden. Again, if you're taking off the whole thing, that's okay, but to make a hole, that would be a problem, that's the rebuke. The sages say that it's permitted, because they said, no, that's not the way of making an opening for a barrel like that, by making a hole. That's not considered as what's called derech Pesach, it's not the way of doing it, and therefore they say that's going to be permitted. Now, continues the Mishnah, and you're not allowed to make a hole on the side, and the Gemara is going to explain exactly what does that mean. We're on the side, are we talking about, and why would that be forbidden? Now continues the Mishnah, let's say the barrel already had a hole, don't put on the whole wax, because you want to seal the hole, because that's going to be smoothing the wax, and then you're going to violate the av malacha b'machik, which was by the skin, the hide, they would smooth it off, because they want to use it for leather, so that would be smoothing the skin. That to a lot of that is mamachik of mamarich, of smoothing a substance like that of wax. Now Amr B'Yehudei says actually Ma'aseh of Rabbi Yechon ben Zakkai bar Rav. There actually was such a story that came in the place of our Rav, in front of Rabbi Yechon ben Zakkai, with such a story where someone was smoothing the wax. But he says I'm afraid of that. Maybe this person is smoothing out the wax to attach it to the walls of the vessel around the hole, and then he's violating the melacha deraisa of memarech, of memachik, and therefore that he's going to be chayav as a chatas. Now, regarding the halacha, the opening halacha of our Mishnah, the Mishnah said that a person could break the barrel to get to the figs that are inside of it, as long as you're not intending to make a clear out of it, that you're not making a Pesach. Now, Amr Beisha, he qualifies that teaching. He says, Loisha, we didn't learn that you could break the barrel. And additionally, one of the variables in breaking the barrel was you're taking a knife to break open the barrel. So now he says we didn't learn that you're allowed to do this ila jerusas. Only if the dried figs are pressed together in a cake. A very classic Talmudic food was an igul shel devela, was a cake of dried figs. So when you have the dried figs, you have to take like a sword or a knife. You have to really chop like a piece of cheese, like a roll, like a cake of cheese. You need a sword or a knife to cut through. That's Rabbi Shloimy is saying that since you're allowed to move the knife because you're allowed to use it to cut the dried figs, so you're allowed to use it also to break open the barrel. But if let's say the dried figs inside were separate and you don't need the sword, the knife to cut them, then you're not allowed to take the knife to break open the barrel. Because as we're going to shortly explain, our mission is like Rabbi Nechem, that he says the vessel could only be used for its designated utility that's always used for, as the Gemara is going to explain. So therefore, you're not allowed to use a knife for something else, but what it's made for. A knife is meant to cut food. So if you needed to cut the food anyway because they're attached, then you're allowed to use it to break open the barrel. But if not, you're not allowed to. Now, it says the Gemara, for others, are you really true that if, let's say, the figs are separated and not connected, you're not allowed to use it to break open the barrel? But Meisvei, we learned the following brayser. Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg says, maybe the person can bring a barrel of wine, and he can use it to cut off the top of the barrel with a sword, and you could leave the food in front of the guest on Shabbos. There's nothing to be concerned about. Even though wine is not something that's cut, it's a liquid. So didn't you tell me it's only if you needed to anyways cut the figs and that if they were even separate it'd be forbidden? Says the Gemara, you're right, Hahi Rabbanan. That mission is going like Rabbanan. That they disagree with Rabbi Nechem. And they say any vessel could be used, whatever, whether it's for its regular utility or for something that's not its regular utility. But Masnid, our mission is Rabbi Nechem. It's going like Rabbi Nechem. And as we're going to shortly explain, Rabbi Nechem holds the kli can only use for what it's usually used for, which is to cut food. So once you're using to cut food, then you can use it to bake the barrel, but if not, then you wouldn't be able to. Says the Gemara, a very obvious question. What was pushing Rabbi Shloimy to say that the Tana is Rabbi Nechemia, and therefore, since it's Rabbi Nechemia who said you could only use a vessel that's usually used for, therefore he had to tell you and qualify the Halacha Mishnah that it's a Bedrusa is that the dried figs are connected to each other. Look what Mefarades talk about that the figs are even separate and still would be mutter because Rabbanan is going like Rabbanan. What's pushing you to say it's Rabbi Nechemia to then say it has to be that it's that they're Drusas? So Rabbi says because Masnin Kashi said that the wording of the Mishnah he found difficult. My year, the Tani Gregors, why is the Mishnah when it has to tell you a case of break open the barrel, which is pretty common, like you want to open snack bags and all these different things, why are you picking dried figs? Listen to Paris, say fruits. Why are you being so specific and saying dried figs? Lishmamana, rather you want to tell me because what's unique about dried figs? Bedrusas, those are things that generally press tightly together. And because they're tightly pressed together, that's why you're allowed to use to break open the barrel with the knife, because it's the kli l'dava hanitel, for the thing that's usually used for. That's why you're allowed to use it. Oh, it's like Rabbi Nechemia, and therefore he just explains that it has to be specifically juices and not for others. Now, similarly, the way we just explained that the mission of the Brisa are different opinions, our mission of Nechemia and the Brisa Rabbanan, so a similar type of a resolution the Gemara brings Tanya Chada. We learned in one Brisa that says Chaysalis, baskets, which are these vessels that are made out of the palm fronds, like branches, and they make like baskets out of them. And they put inside of them like immature dates that they still need to ripen. So if you have these baskets shel gregors of dried figs, which shel tamarman of dates, so you want to access the fruits that are inside. So there's a few different options how to access it. So the Tana Kama says, what you can do is matter. You could untie. If let's say the covering was tied with a rope, you could untie the rope. Umafkia, you could unravel the rope. And you could cut the rope. So 3 different ways of getting to the prayers that it's inside. Now, Tanya in another verse that says no, matter you could untie it. Avaloi mafkia. But you cannot unravel, let's say, to undo the strands of the rope with a knife, let's say, that you're not allowed to do. And you're not allowed to cut the rope. Why not? Because a vessel could only be used for what it's usually used for. And the knife's not usually used to cut rope. It's usually cut a piece of meat or cut a piece of cheese. So how do we understand this contradiction? Well, that says the Gemara, like Kash, it's not a difficulty like we answered in the previous Gemara's discussion. Harabanan, the Brisa says you're allowed to do all these things with the knife, like Rabbanan. Haram Nechemia, the one that says you can only use it for something that's not used for, which is not in cutting a rope, that's like Rav Nechemia, like we learned the Brisa that this is a machlekes. He says, I feel a tarvet, even the spoon, I feel a talis, even the jacket, even the cloak, I feel a second, even the knife, although they're classic non-muktzah items, he holds ein netam, they cannot be moved only for the normal use for. You can't use it even for another permitted utility. And therefore, that's why you can't use it, even though you're allowed to unravel, let's say, the rope or to cut it. But you're not use a knife to do that, because that's not what a knife is meant for. And that's why, again, we said in the Halacha the Mishnah that Shebad Mesachabes, Lechem and Gregors, it has to be done with, if it's for druses, because it's going to like Nechemia who holds it, you can only use it what it's normally used for, and then by druses you need to use it anyway, so then we let you take on your way there to break open the barrel with that.
What's the issue?
It's in Halachas HaMuktzah. Just like we're not allowed you're not allowed to move things that are not prepared. That's prepared. This is what's prepared for. That's not used for that. So therefore, that would be considered in the category of muktzah. Now the Gemara continues and says, related to halacha of the Mishnah regarding making holes in barrels. So Baimani Rav Sheshes had the following question from Rav Sheshes: Ma'u lemivras? What's halacha? Can you poke chavita to make a hole in a barrel, beburtio with a spear to make a hole in the wall, b'shabbata on Shabbos? So what's the question? So the Gemara explains: Lepischa k'machaven? When you're making that hole with the spear, you make a hole in that earthenware vessel. Is your intention to make a Pesach, an opening, which for us that's forbidden? You don't make an opening that's either tikkun mana or binyan, whatever it is, you're making something forbidden on Shabbos. Or you don't know, maybe no, maybe your intention is just to have a generous spout, meaning to say that you want to pour off the wine with a large hole. From the fact that you didn't do it the way people usually make a hole, which is a nice round hole, and you just went and took a spear and you made a hole in it, maybe your intention is just to be able to easily pour off. And for sure, if it's permitted, it's not to make a Pesach. A Pesach means to say you want to fix the vessel. I don't want to fix the vessel. I'm breaking the vessel. I just need like when I'm pouring off, I need more space to pour off, but not the intention of making a Pesach. So Amalei says to him, he says, no, your intention is to make an opening, and therefore that's going to be forbidden. On that, the Gemara says, the Gemara is from the Bryce we mentioned before. We quoted Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg. He says, maybe Adam Chavish al Yain, a person could bring a barrel of wine, and he could cut off the top with a sword. We had brought in the previous Gemara's discussion regarding showing that it doesn't make a difference if it's figs or wine, but in that case, it shows that you're allowed to chop off the top with a sword. Well, what do you mean? I thought you'd tell me that's considered making a Pesach. On that he says, no, no, there most definitely your intention is to just open up the mouth wider, and what you're doing is you're doing it beneath the clay stopper. As it says, when Rashi explains, matzah is reisha, means to say the top of the barrel, which is the top of the barrel. On top of the barrel, there would be like a clay stopper. There, most definitely, your intention is just to be able to have more room. But hachi here, if you're making the hole with the spear, if your intention was to just make more room to pour off, then you should have just opened up the barrel. You should have just taken off the stopper. Why are you making the hole? That's obviously because you want to make a Pesach. Here, when you're chopping up the whole thing, obviously you're not making a Pesach because you just want to be able to get the contents out. Therefore, it's permitted. So that, again, depends on your intention, what you're doing. If you're destroying it, like that's what they say, like by the snack bag, some say, okay, you got to destroy the whole thing. You're destroying the whole thing, and obviously I'm not making a Pesach, but if you're making open, now you have a Pesach, now you could have an opening way of putting in chips and taking out. That's where that whole halacha discussion comes from some like a sugya here in our daf. Now the Gemara continues and says from our Mishnah, we said, we said that you're not allowed to make a hole in the cover of the barrel, and that was a machlekes. That was Rabbi Yehuda. Chacham said no, you're allowed to, and then the Mishnah said, and we'll see why it's important. The next words in the Mishnah were, but everyone holds that you're not allowed to make a hole in the side. So Amar Avuna, he says machlekes. He qualifies this machlekes regarding making a hole, which the Mishnah said I'll make a hole in the cover of the barrel. That's Rabbi Yehuda. Chacham said it's permitted. So he says this machlekes making a hole in the cover of the barrel was lamala, was only on the top of the cover. That's where the Rabbanan say it's permitted because it's not normal to make an opening on the top. Rather, people normally just take off the cover. So that's where the machlekes is that forbidden or permitted. But on the side of the cover, where sometimes people actually would make an opening. Why would he make an opening on the side, not on the top? You don't want to open on the top because you don't want earth and you don't want some type of like leaves or whatever it is to fall inside the wine. So it would be somewhat normal to make an opening on the side. So that actually, everyone would agree that is forbidden because then you are making a Pesach. On the top is the machlekes, is that considered normal to make a Pesach and wouldn't you just take off the stopper? That's the machlekes. And he says behind Diktani, and that's what it says, the next words in the Mishnah, lo yikvena mitzida. Don't make a hole on its side. Which side of what? This is going to be a machlekes amaram. According to this interpretation, it's going on the lid, on the cover of the barrel. It's saying, but don't make a hole on the side of the lid, because there everyone agrees that would be forbidden, because that's normal to make a hole over there. You don't want to just take off the thing, because leaves and earth are going to fall in. So you would make a hole on the side of the lid. That's one interpretation. Rav Chizdam, he says no. He says actually machlekes between Rabbi Yehuda and the Chacham in our Mishnah is specifically minatzat, is on the side of the lid. There is where Rabbi Yehuda says forbidden because some people would make an opening there, but on the top. He says mutter. He says everyone would agree that's going to be permitted because that's not the derech of Pesach. And even Rabbi Yehuda would agree to that principle. The Hadik Tani said, this that it says in the Mishnah, like Vena Mitzida, don't make a hole on the side, which everyone is agreeing to that halacha. What do you mean? Didn't you just tell me that's where they're disagreeing about is on the side? No, Hasan B'guf for the chavos. That's in the actual barrel itself, not in the cover. In the lid, that's a machlekes. Would you make a hole in the lid or not? Wouldn't you just take off the lid? No, it's a machlekes. No, maybe some say you would, some say you wouldn't. But in the barrel itself, that you're not allowed to make a hole because that is making a Pesach in the barrel itself. That is normal to make a hole, and therefore that would be forbidden according to everyone. Now, continuing on this theme, Tan Rabban learned the Brisa regarding making a hole in the barrel. The Brisa says, "Ein nikvin nekev chodesh b'Shabbos." You're not allowed to make a new hole in the vessel on Shabbos, like we said. That's making a Pesach. That's tikkun mana. Now, if you're coming to add on, then you could add on to the hole. You're not making a Pesach. Meaning, if you already have a hole in something, you already have access. Adding on to the hole is not doing anything. But V'yeshem is something no you're not allowed to add on to it. Now, but they both agree, shenek v'nekev yashin. You could go ahead and make a hole in an old hole that was already plugged up, like a tchila initially. Because when you go back and you reopen it, so you're not like making a Pesach because it's already made. And the fact that it was closed up is not significant, and therefore, you're allowed to go ahead and reopen the old hole. Now, the Gemara asks, the Tanakama that permits to add on to the hole, why is it different to make a new hole? The law that you say you're not allowed to do komisaka pischa because you're fixing the opening. So I suvinami. When you're adding on also komisaka pischa, you're also fixing the opening because you're widening. So there's gemar malacha, there's tikkun mana, there's makabah patish. Even if you're adding on, what's it mean adding on or making a new one? So Marabi says, I'll tell you as follows. And this is a very important concept regarding the halacha of making a Pesach. According to biblical law, kol Pesach shein asur lahachnas loitzi. If it's an opening that's not meant to take in and to let out, in and out, in the Pesach. It's not considered as an opening, and therefore it would not be biblically forbidden. And over here, it's not meant to take in. For Rabbanu who do gaz, it's a rabbis who make a gzeira to say that it's even if it's a one-way Pesach, it would be forbidden. Why do they say that? Because of a concern for a chicken coop. What's the problem with a chicken coop? The problem with a chicken coop is that a person might make a mistake. Because in truth, a chicken coop's hole is the avidly yuli avir. It's actually meant to take in the ear from outside. And to let out the bad ear from inside the putrid smell, that the chickens don't die from the smell. Now, the problem is, people might think that it's only meant for one way and not for both ways. Now, so therefore we say that even if it's a one-way hole, we say you're not allowed to do that, because you might come to do it by a chicken coop, thinking also that's one way, when really it's two ways, and then you can be violating the biblical malacha of makabah patish. Now, but therefore, that's why that's why with this Tanakh is telling you. But if you want to add on to the hole, that might be you could add on to the hole. And they were not going to make it exer, you might come to add on to the hole by a chicken coop, because because most definitely to add on to the hole of a chicken coop, a person is not going to add on to the hole. Why not? As you continue to my base, because you don't want the different types of bugs like rats and weasels who kill the chickens to come in. So you're not going to make the hole too big. So there's no problem about adding onto the hole by a different kli, which is really not biblically problematic. It's only gezerah, chicken coop, because of a chicken coop, and chicken coop you're not going to add on. So therefore it's okay. But the yeshem, those who they want to say that actually no. You're not allowed to add on. Why not? Because at times what's going to happen is that you really didn't go ahead and make the hole up by the chicken coop big enough to let that bad ear, the putrid smell from the chickens, and all the waste matter over there to let it out and to bring in the airspace. You're going to come to make it bigger, and that would be the malacha makabah patish, because that's the first time you're making the hole. And if we let you make a hole in the regular place, you might make it with a chicken coop, and even when you're adding on, you might add on over there. And if it wasn't made to size, that actually would be the malacha, because it's not big enough yet to let the weasels in. It's just big enough. You're just making it bigger to let the ear out and in. So therefore, that's why they said you're not allowed to even go ahead and be meisid. And Dorish Rab Nachman Shemir B'Yechin, he says halacha kishem like the Yeshayim, that it's forbidden even to add on to the hole. Again, if it's just adding onto the hole, it's simply because of the case of the chicken coop, which you might be a problematic adding onto the hole. Now in the Brisa we said B'Shaban they agree, you're allowed to go ahead and open up an old hole. The old hole was plugged up. You're allowed to reopen that hole. So Amar Yehuda Mishmal, he qualifies this teaching. He says, we didn't learn you're allowed to make the hole of the old hole only if the plug was in a place that it was meant to protect the aroma of the wine, that it shouldn't go out and get ruined. Oh, and since that's not really such a tight plug, so therefore it's not so significant. But if let's say that plug was to strengthen the vessel, that the wine shouldn't go out, since that's a bona fide plug, when you open up that plug, it's like making a new hole, and therefore us it's going to be forbidden, just like making a hole initially is going to be forbidden. So in that thing about qualifies says, what's this case of you tell me when you're protecting just the aroma of the wine, you're not really solidifying, not concretizing the barrel, you're just protecting it. That then it would be permitted to open up the old hole, but when you're strengthening it, you're making that plug is making like a new vessel, so then you would not be able to make that hole because it's like making a new hole. So we have two opinions. Rav Chizdi says, Lamalam in the yain, says if it's above the wine, as you see in the picture, if it's above the level of the wine, Zeh l'shamer, that's just protecting the aroma of the wine. So that's not, you didn't really make a real plug, it takes very little to open that up, it's not making a new hole. But if it lets it below the wine level, that's to strengthen the barrel itself, that would be forbidden to open up even though it was an old hole, because it's like making like a new hole. But Rav Amay says, no, actually, he says even below the level of the wine also, that's also to protect, because since you don't have the weight of the wine laying down on it, so then it's enough even with just a small little plug, and it wouldn't be considered something as part of the vessel itself, and you'd be able to open up that hole. He says, what's considered strengthening the barrel? Is you're making the hole in the bottom of the sediments, meaning by the bottom, where all the weight of the wine is laying on it, that's where it'd be considered chazik, that's where it requires a very strong plug, and that's where it'd be forbidden to go ahead and make that old hole, because that would be like a new hole. Now, Amalei Ba'al Rava, Abai says to Rava, who he says the most stringent, he says like it has to really be a really, really tight plug to be considered as you're making an opening, and if not for that, it's not really considered as closed. So he says, Tanya Maseilach, we have a brayso that supports you that we see, and it's an interesting comparison. Shtaisa says, why is this specifically Rava, not like Rav Chizda? But that you see that it doesn't lose its status of an opening, only if you do a really bona fide end of the line closing. That's considered as a total seal, which would make it problematic to reopen it. But if not, we don't see it as totally a seal. What's the comparison? So interesting comparison. The brayso says like this. By Yisasim, if there's a closed house, Yeshle Arba Amas, the person has 4 Amas. What is this talking about? The Gemara Baba Basra tells us that when in Talmudic times, they used to have the homes would open up into courtyards. Now, how do you share the area of the courtyard? Who gets what rights to use in the courtyard? So the Gemara Baba says, the courtyard gets divided according to the openings, meaning according to the amount of openings you have in the courtyard, that's how the division is going to go. So let's say one guy has a house that has 2 openings into the courtyard. The other guy has 4 openings going into the courtyard. Each guy takes by his opening 4 amas in the courtyard opposite his opening, according to the width of his opening. And the rest they split evenly. So what the brayso here is talking about, if let's say one guy's opening got closed off before they divided the courtyard, but they didn't destroy the frame. They just closed off the opening between the side posts of the frame. So that's what the brayso is coming to say. He does not lose his halachic status of an opening. He still has an opening. He doesn't use that doorway. He closed it off, but he didn't destroy the frame. Now, but parts of Spetzima, let's say he destroyed his frame and then he sealed it, so then it's not really considered as a Pesach anymore. So Ein Daled Amas. Now he doesn't have 4 amas by that opening. It's not considered opening into the courtyard. Similarly, a similar halacha is By Yisasim. Another similar comparison is a sealed house which has a dead person inside of it. So it's not going to contaminate the whole perimeter of the area around the house. But Parah says, let's say that in that house where the dead person's there, they're leaving him over here. They even destroyed the frames of the house, that there's no more coming and going out of this house. Then it actually is going to contaminate the whole perimeter, because now the house became like a kever. So now the area around the house is going to contaminate in the area of Daled Amas like a kever. As the Gemara says in Masechet Seder, a dead person captures 4 amas in the perimeter to be metame, which is by his grave. And that's exerted rabbanim, because if your person is allowed to come too close, he might lean over and you're not going to discern that and understand that he might become tamei. But one thing we see from these 2 halachas is that just closing off the area does not make it that you lose the Pesach. If you totally destroy the door frame, then for the halachas of chatzeris and for the halachas of tumah, then we say, okay, all of a sudden now it's sealed off. Now it's not an opening anymore. That says Abai to Rav, interesting comparison. That's similar to your halacha. You said for something to lose the status has to be really, really a very strong plug. But if not, then it doesn't lose the Pesach Shabbat. It's still considered Pesach. And if you reopening it would not make it's not a new opening, it's an old opening. That's similar to the halacha over here that you see that, let's say, sealing a door does not remove the status of the door unless parts is betzima. A house where the corpse inside its entrance was sealed is considered kever. Only if you totally destroy the frame, that's totally plugging up the thing. That's similar to Rava's halacha of only then would it be considered as undone, and then that it would be considered a problem of being a Pesach moving on. The Gemara continues also with on these halachas about making an opening on Shabbos. So a gufsa, which is a spigot, that they would stick in a hollow reed in the hole of the barrel so that the wine could come out through that reed. So Rav Asi says it's forbidden to do that on Shabbos. Shmuel Shori says it's permitted to do that on Shabbos. So the Gemara explains. To go ahead and initially go ahead and cut to fix that reed to use as a spigot according to the measurements of the hole. Everyone's going to agree that's forbidden because that's tikkun man. Of course, you're making a spout on Shabbos, that's forbidden. Ahaduri, to just put the pipe back in if it fell out, no one's going to disagree that's permitted. It's like a door. You're not considered buying that slicer when you open and close the door. Here also, it's meant to be there, just putting in and out, it's not a problem. Key pligi, when do they disagree, is the chaticha v'lo mesakna. If it was cut, but it wasn't yet put in from before Shabbos into the hole, to know if it's according to the measurement. Mandas, the one that says forbidden, is gazrina demos l'mechatek l'tatchila. If we let you go ahead and see on Shabbos if it fits according to the measurements, even though we already cut, we're concerned that you might come to go ahead and initially cut it, which is problematic, which is tikkun man. But Mandas, sure, the ones that are permitted holds like gazrina. We don't make such a gazrina. Says the Gemara Kitanoi. This is actually similar to machlikas tanoi. The Brisa says, "Ein chaychin shveiferes b'yom tov." Now I'll cut a tube on Yom Tov. Ben tzarich lem b'Shabbos. Yom Tov say not do on Shabbos. That's tikkun man. If you're making it to be like a spigot. Now nafla, let's say it falls out of the hole. The gear says magzir neis b'Shabbos. You're allowed to put it back on Shabbos. Ben tzarich lem Yom Tov. You don't have to say you're allowed to put it back on Yom Tov. Like you said, putting back in. It's not. You're not doing anything. Now Rabbi Yisha is lenient. So think about Rabbi Yisha. Hi, which one of these two halachas is it going on? Elim HaReisha, if he's going on the ratio, it says you're allowed to cut it. That says you're not allowed to cut it and to make it exact measurements. He's lenient over there. What do you mean you're fixing a vessel? That's one of the lamates malachas. Ela sefer, rather it's going on the sefer, which says you're allowed to just put it back in. Well, Tanakama not Mishukosher. Tanakama says you're also allowed to put it back in. What do you mean he's lenient on what? So rather there's a third case here that wasn't being discussed. The chaticha of the mesaknik. The difference between them is it was cut already, but it wasn't yet figured out if it's according to the measurement. So that's what the machlekes is. Masav Gezrin. The Tanakama said that's forbidden. And because we make the gezerah, but Master and Rabbi Yisrael holds we don't make such a gezerah. I think more concludes that the halacha is Darsh Rav Shesha B'Rei David Mishmeit Rabbi Yechlan halacha Rabbi Yisrael loves like Rabbi Yisrael that we go leniently. We don't make such a gezerah. If it was already cut, you're allowed to go ahead and put it into the hole on Shabbos. So the Gemara continues and says B'Ma'is Nekuva that if the barrel had a hole, etc. So he said don't put on wax because that's a problem about memarech, about smoothing. It's one of the avmalachas of memarech. Says the Gemara, a related case, Mishcha, if you have thick oil, Rav says forbidden to smear that on Shabbos. Shmuel says permitted. So the Gemara explains. Mandas, the one that says you now smear the thick oil is gazrinim shum Shabbat. If we let you smear a thick oil that in similar, like seems similar consistency to wax, that would be a problem. Mamachik, they're not allowed to do that. Mandas, the one that says permitted, is like gazrin holds that we don't make such a gezerah. A different version actually has that it's not true. Amalei Rav Shmuel Bar Chanal or Rav Yosef says, "Beferish Amal Mashmei Rav." You explicitly told us the name of Rav that actually not like you just quoted before that he holds forbidden. That Mishcha Shari that actually smearing thick oil is actually going to be permitted. Now, related says the Gemara on this topic. Amar Tavis Rishba, Tavis the hunter said, Amar Shmuel name of Shmuel. It says, "Haitar for the asa." This to place a leaf of a girdle of a hadis in the hole of a barrel, because the leaf will be like a gutter. And the wine will pour out through the leaf. That's forbidden to be done on Shabbos. Says the Gemara, my time. What's the problem? So we have two interpretations. Rabbi Yirmiyah he says it's gzeir mishum maraziv. If we let you put the leaf in to function like a gutter, you might actually prepare a real gutter, which would be a problem about tikkun mana. Rav Asher says no. The problem is gzeir shemiyiktam. If we let you use the leaf, you might come to break off the leaf from the branch. And if that type of breaking, even if it's already detached, that's mesak and kli. As the Brisa told Mesach is Beis Dav Lamagimel of Beis. If let you take a piece of a splinter and you break it off to use as like a toothpick, that you're not allowed to break off. And if you did, you have a chatzah because you're making a tikkun money. You're making a toothpick right now. So here also by the leaf, the problem we don't let you use it is because you might come to break off the leaf from the branch. Says what's the difference between these two interpretations? The difference between them is the katim amantchi. If it's already broken off from the branch and it's just laying over there. According to Rav Ashi, it's going to be permitted because the whole gezerah is because you might break it off. It's already broken off, it's no problem. But according to Rabbi Yirmiyah, it would be problematic still because you can't use even the leaf. Because if you let you use that as a gutter, you might come to make an actual gutter, which would be a problem about taking mana. Once we mentioned Rabbi Shmuel, so we say another machlekes Rabbi Shmuel, which is unrelated. Beis Sadya, regarding felt that a person used to fold and put beneath him either as a pillow or a blanket. So Rav says you're not allowed to bring it through the street, even to like wear it when you're clothed in it. Shmuel says permitted. So the Gemara qualifies the machlekes. V'rachen, by soft felt, where it's normal to warm yourself up with it and wear the pelts, wear this felt. The kula amalei pligi d'shar. So no one's going to disagree that, of course, you're allowed to wear that in the street because that's normal to wear as clothing. B'kashin, if it's a hard piece of felt, the kula amalei pligi d'as, no one's going to disagree that it's forbidden to wear that because no one wears it. That's like taking like a carpet and wearing a carpet. I mean, no one wears that. So that would be a problem about a masa. Ki pligi b'mitzi, the machlekes Rav Shmuel was by a middle type of a category. Manda, the one that says forbidden is kizmechsi k'masa. That looks like a load. Manda Shad, the one that says forbidden, it says lo mechsi k'masa. It doesn't look like a load. Again, it's a middle type of a category. What do you compare it to, the hard felt or to the soft felt? And the Gemara actually tells us that actually, Bahad the Rav, this opinion of Rav that we quoted that he said forbidden, Lav b'ferishit actually was not explicitly said by him that's forbidden. And actually, Elam Machlolet actually was inferred, and the Gemara is actually going to prove that he didn't hold that it's forbidden. Because what happened was, the story was, the Rav Iklahu Asra. Rav went to a certain place, there was no room in the house for the students to sit. So Nafik Yasser B'Karmelis, he went out, okay, there's no room over here in the house, the overflowing crowd. He went out and he sat in the Karmelis. Now, isolate beside this, so they brought him, okay, sitting in the street over here, so they brought him a pillow, Lo Yasser, he didn't sit on it. Now, Man the Chaz, the one who saw Savar, he thought Mishum the Beisad Yasser, because the pillow was made out of felt. And, okay, because you're not allowed to bring, you're not allowed to carry even by wearing felt, because that mitzi is forbidden. That middle type of a category is considered as carrying like a load. Says Gemara, it's actually not the reason why I didn't sit in it. He didn't sit in it. He did not sit in it because it was forbidden to carry. I'm not allowed to have anah from Ma'aseh Shabbos. No, the Rav Achuzi Machos actually Rav made an announcement. He says Beisad Yeshari, it is permitted to go ahead and carry by wearing some felt, even in the middle type of category. But Mishum Kavod Rabbi is saying this is because of the dignity of our teachers, who they didn't have what to sit on, and they were sitting on the ground. Lo Yeshav, that's why he didn't sit in it. And says the Gemara, Manenu, who are these rabbis saying that he was saying that they couldn't sit, so I'm not going to sit. It was Rav Kahan the Rav Asi, who, as Rashi explains, they were really his students, but they were his colleagues. So he called them Rabbi Seinu, but that's why he didn't sit. But really, the truth is, he actually held that it actually is permitted. We continue the halacha of the next Mishnah, that it also continues on these themes about preparation of foods as they relate to Shabbos. Says the Mishnah, you're allowed to put in a cooked dish into a pit that doesn't have water. Why are you putting food into the pit? So that it should be protected, that it shouldn't get spoiled because of the heat. Like we have now, a heat wave, it's like very hot. So in the pit, it's cold and damp and cool. So you're allowed to put food in over there that should be protected. Similarly, you're allowed to put a vessel full of good water, bedroyim, in a pool of bad water to protect it, that it should cool off and shouldn't get heated up. Now, you're allowed to put cold stuff in the sun, that it should get heated up and warmed up like that. Another halacha is if someone's vessels, clothing, got soaked with water when he was walking, let's say he fell into water on Shabbos. So Mahalman, he could continue walking with his wet clothing. He doesn't have to be concerned. What would the concern be? The concern would be Marasayan. People say, hey, he laundered his clothing. What is he? He looks so wet. Obviously, he laundered his clothing. That's not a problem. But when you get to the outermost courtyard, which is the closest to the opening of the city, in the city, which is a protected place, then you go ahead and you take off your clothing and you spread it out in the sun to dry it out. But don't do it opposite facing people, because they're going to suspect, the guy's hanging all his clothing on the line over here. It definitely looks like someone did some laundry here on Shabbos. So to prevent that, do it, but don't do what other people see, because they're going to look like Marasai. Now the Gemara goes through all these halachas of the Mishnah and discusses what's the relevancy and necessity of saying these halachas. So he said in the Mishnah that a person could go ahead and put his food into a pit so that it should not get spoiled. Says Gemara Pshita. Obviously, you're allowed to put your food into the pit, but what would the halachic problem be? Says Gemara Malditim, what would you say? We should be concerned that you might come to smooth out the holes in the bottom of the pit because you're putting your barrel down. Oh, it starts tilting. Okay, you start smoothing out the ground. That's a problem of Ashur Gumas would be baina with. So therefore, Kamash I tell you that no, it's not concerned. You're allowed to put your stuff down. We're not concerned that you might come to smooth out the bottom of the pit. Next halacha we said in the Mishnah was you're allowed to put in good water in a bottle in the bad water. Let's say bad water, like some type of a mikveh. You're allowed to put it. It's cold. You're allowed to put in your barrel, your bottle of water to cool it off. Says Gemara Pshita. Obviously, what's the problem? There's no problem about cooling off things on Shabbos. Says Gemara, you're right. That halacha is not necessary, but it was for Sefer Eshcholei, which was a similar halacha in the reverse. That's why we said this one. What was the next case? The opposite. You're allowed to put cold water in the sun to heat it up. That's why we said you're allowed to put in the hot water into the cold water. Says Gemara, that's also obvious. What would be the problem about putting your cold water in the sun? You're not doing it in malacha. Says no, what would you say? If we let you put your cold water in the sun, we should be concerned that you might come to put it into hot coals because we let you heat it up, so you might not be able to differentiate between the sun or in hot coals, which that would be a problem, but to or that it's from a secondary form of heat from a fire, that is forbidden. Kamashwalan, to tell you that no, we're not concerned with that. You're allowed to put your cold bottle in the sun and let it warm up like that. Next halacha of the Mishnah was Mishnah Nasha B'chuluk. Let's say someone was walking and he got all wet and his clothing is sopping wet. So we said you're allowed to continue walking with it and we're not concerned. And then we said, etc., that okay, when you get there, hang up the clothing, but not where people could see. So related to this, the Gemara brings Amar Yehudim around. It says, Kol Makom She'asur Chacham Ne'mas Ayin. Any place where the sages said there's a problem about appearance of wrongdoing, then even in your most innermost chambers where no one's around, you're not allowed to do something that's a Maras Ayin type of a thing. So the Gemara asks, wait a second, it's not good in our Mishnah. It says you have the sopping wet clothing, you hang it up in the sun, but not facing opposite people. Why not? Because that's Marazayin, looks like you did laundry. So you said if you can't do something Marazayin, you can't do it even when people are not looking. Well, that contradicts Rab. Says the Gemara, you're right, Tanoi, but some machlokes is Tanoi, like in the Brisa. One is like him and one's not like him. The Tanakama says like our Mishnah, not like Rab. That yes, hang up the clothing in the sun, but not facing opposite other people. Rabbi Shimon Oishim, they say no, it's forbidden, even not opposite people, because Maras Ayin is a problem, even B'chadr Chadarim, that is like Rav, and Rav is ruling like those Tana, like the Tanoim, not like the Tana of our Mishnah. Some of this is discussed in today's Daf in Shabbos Daf Kuf Mem Vav, where we started with a Mishnah, again continuing on these themes about preparing food on Shabbos, that a person could break a barrel if he wants to eat the dried figs inside of it. Now, as long as you're not intending to make a vessel, as long as you don't make a good hole, again, this is the classic halacha. We're talking about opening bottles, opening bags, all these different things come from this halacha of the Mishnah. If you're destroying it, so you're allowed to do it to get to the contents. But as long as you're not making an opening, now we had a machlekes if you're allowed to make a hole in the lid of the barrel. And also we said don't put wax on the hole because that would be a problem about memara, about smoothing. The Gemara explained that the Mishnah is like Reb Nechemia. Why? Because from the fact that the case spoken about was specifically dried figs. So why picking dried figs, not pears? That's why we had to tell you, Rabbi had to tell you that specifically talking about drusais and not mefaradis, because you're not allowed to use a knife for some ulterior motive. You're only allowed to use it for what it's meant for. It's meant to cut food. So once using to cut the dried figs, then you're allowed to use it to cut open the barrel. But if not, you wouldn't be able to cut, even though halach there's no problem with cutting open the barrel, but you can't use the knife for doing that because the knife has to be used for what it's used for. And similarly, that's how we resolve the two brises, where are you allowed to cut open a basket, which actually that word chaysal is mentioned much in Paiskim regarding what's considered a type of a Pesach that you're allowed to open up, like a bags or whatever that's considered like something you're allowed to break on Shabbos. Which that we said, one said you're allowed to, one said you're not allowed to cut the rope. Again, that's because the machlekes of Nechemia Rabbanan is that what's a knife used for, if it's only for what it's normally used for, or even for other things. Then we said that you're not allowed to go ahead and make a hole in the barrel on Shabbos. Because the Gemara explained and your intention is to make a hole and not just to make it wider. But you said you're allowed to chop off the top of the barrel with a sword because that's le'in yafa k'machav, that you just want to get it. You don't want to make an opening. Therefore, that would be permitted. When a machlekes in the Mishnah, if, like we said, if you're allowed to make a hole in the lid of the barrel. So we have two different interpretations. What's the case of making the hole in the lid of the barrel? One Amira said the machlekes was on the top of the lid. But on the side, everyone hold that's going to be forbidden because that makes sense why you make a hole in the side because you don't want stuff dripping on the top. But on the top, that was a machlekes. Is that the derech to make a Pesach or it's not? That was a machlekes, and that's why it says in the next line in the Mishnah that according to everyone, they were saying that you're not allowed to make a hole in the side. What's the side of the lid? Yeah, that's according to everyone because the machlekes is on the top. Other Amor says no, the machlekes is on the side, but on the top, everyone hold that's mutter. No one's making a hole in the top. Just take off the lid. Why would you make a hole in the top? So that would be permitted. Machlekes is on the side. So therefore, when it says that you're not allowed to make a hole in the side according to everyone, that must mean in the barrel, in the barrel itself. That everyone agrees it's forbidden, but in the lid, that's not according to everyone. That is a machlekes on this side of the lid, if that's problematic or not. Then we said a brisa that says you're not allowed to make a new hole on Shabbos. The machlekes if you're allowed to add on to the hole. Additionally, everyone agrees that you're allowed to open up an old hole initially on Shabbos. Now, regarding those two halachas, if you're allowed to add on to the hole or not, because we explained biblically, the problem is only if an opening takes in and takes out. Now, but why is it problematic if it only is a one-way hole? Because we made a gzeir d'rabbanan because regarding a chicken coop. Chicken coop is really taking in and taking out. People don't realize that. So if we let you do it one way, you might make to buy the chicken coop, which is the Issa D'Oraisa. Now, But if you're coming to add on, that's not a problem. We didn't make such a gzeira because you're not going to add on by a lul. Why aren't you not going to add on by a lul? Because you're not going to make it bigger, because you don't want the rodents coming in. Now, Yeshayim, those who said that no, you're not allowed to even add on, because sometimes you're not going to make it exactly as even by the chicken coop enough, and you might come to widen it, and therefore then you can be violating tikkun man, and therefore you're not even add on by, let's say, something else, like by the barrel. Now, regarding the halacha, we said that everyone agrees by the old hole that you're allowed to make it initially on Shabbos. So that the Gemara qualified says we didn't learn this only where it's meant to protect, but if it's meant to strengthen, that would be considered forbidden. So we had two interpretations. What's the case of l'shamer and to l'chazik? If it's above the wine level, so that's where it's l'shamer, that's going to be permitted. But if it's beneath the level of the wine, that first interpretation, that's l'chazik, that would be a strong hole, that would be forbidden. Second interpretation says no, protecting it is even if it's beneath the wine level. L'chazik, which is forbidden, that's a really tight plug, so it's like really like making a new opening. That's b'shalayim, that's on the bottom, on the bottom, because that's really and this is what's important concept as you see the Gemara's comparison. That's a really tight plug, and therefore when you're going to open it up again, that's like really making a new opening initially. So Abai said to Rava, I'm bringing you a price that supports you that you see by the opening of a courtyard, and also for the tumah of a kever, which is totally sealed, that you have to totally destroy the frame. That supports Rava, because you see you need to have a really bona fide closing to say it's not a Pesach anymore. But if you're just plugging it, it's still a Pesach. And therefore when you're opening and not making a Pesach, that supports Rava. Interesting comparison, but that's where you see it has to be steam al yasa. That's like him who says, yeah, the hole's got to be on the bottom. That's a really tight plug. Then opening, that would be forbidden on Shabbos, even though it's a neck of Yash. We then spoke about a spigot. So he said that to make a spigot initially on Shabbos, obviously that's forbidden. That's tikkun man. To just put back the pipe of the reed of the spigot, that's permitted, like opening and closing a door. You're not buying it and slice it, buying it and slice it. It's meant to take in, take out. The machlekes of Rabbi Shmuel was if it was cut, but it wasn't yet put into place. That's the machlekes, and as we found the similar machlekes tanoim by cutting a shvev, which we said she's mekel says what do you mean? What? It's regarding that third case where it was cut but it wasn't put in. Are we geyser that you're going to come to initially go ahead and cut on Shabbos or not? That was the machlekes. We had a yeshayim that some say it's a machlekes by oil, thick oil. If you're allowed to smear it on Shabbos or not. If we're going to be geyser at the Shabbat, if you might come to do the same thing regarding wax. We said tarfa the asa. We said to take a leaf and use it as a gutter to have the wine come out. That we said that's going to be aser. And we had two interpretations, either because you might make a real gutter, which that's taking mana, or because you might come to be kite, you're going to break it off from the branch, which that's going to be tikkun mana for the leaf itself. And the nafkamina was if it's cut if it's already cut off, according to one that says shema yiktam, it's obviously going to be permitted. According to shema marzav, you might come to do a regular gutter, that would be forbidden. Then we had machlekes regarding beisad, regarding felt. If you're allowed to carry into the street, so we said if it's soft, everyone holds the mutter, you're allowed to wear felt. If it's hard, no one wears such a thing, that's forbidden. The middle type of grade, there was machlekes that look like a masli or not, and that we said that actually Rav, who was quoted as saying that's forbidden, actually it's not true. There was a story that we inferred from there, he didn't sit down on the middle grade felt that was brought for him, and he only didn't sit down because there wasn't room for the other Talmid Chacham, but really he held like Shmuel that actually is permitted, and no one disagrees really by the case of the mitzvah. Then we went to the next mission, we said that you're allowed to put a tafshel into a bar so that it should be protected, that it simply should not cool off. So that was a chiddush. What's the chiddush? That we're not geyser that you might come to smooth out the ground, because you're putting in your bottle in the pit, you might come to smooth it out because it's not staying. That's the chiddush. Also, we said you're allowed to put in good waters into like in a bottle, a good bottle of a Poland Spring into like a dirty pool of water that it should cool down. What's the chiddush? You're not doing anything. You're right. The chiddush of the next case. That you're allowed to put in cold water. Let's say the cold bottle of Poland Spring. You want to have like a hot tea, so you can put in the sun to heat up. What's the chiddush in that? Chiddush is if we let you heat up in the sun, you might come to heat up in remetz, which that's obviously a problem about. Told us or that's the chiddush that we're not concerned for that. And the last halach we said that if let's say a person's clothing gets sopping wet, so he's allowed to keep on walking with it, but when he gets to the outermost chutzner, then he takes it off, but he shouldn't spread out opposite the people. So that's what the Gemara says. Really, that's a machlekes tanoim, and Rav is not like our Mishnah. Rav is like the other tanoim that say that it's actually permitted. It's forbidden. That we said that if it's shlei keneged ha'am, is there a problem with maras ayin? Rav holds like those other tanoim that say it actually not even shlei keneged ha'am. In general, you're not allowed to hang it up because what you can't do in front of the people, even machaj chadam in most chambers would be a problem about maras ayin. Thank you to any time for hosting us.